Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here. I'm going to be talking about a game yesterday played in the second round of the Sinquefield Cup between Aronian and Topalov. And, in this game, I think it was a pretty interesting one. Without much ado, let's start it off. We get a mainline Slav where black can play e6, and taking here on c4 is a pretty common option. But in this position, black played an early a6, and usually he wants to play b5 and g6 and kind of this position, perhaps bishop f5 at some point. This is very, very solid for black. Um, and we kind of get a really, really solid position after e3, and usually black, white doesn't want to commit his bishop out because black might just, take the pawn after, say, takes here and b5, and it's not so easy to get the pawn back. Usually white plays e3 to defend the pawn, and black decided to go for b5 here, taking some space on the queen side and kind of establishing this stonewall structure over here. And that's really, really solid for black. And usually white doesn't want to commit to b4 because, what black may play b4 himself, or might just leave the structure over here when it's hard to make progress over here for white. And, in this position, white decided to close the position with the structure and kind of relying on a4 to probably chop off b5 and try to apply pressure on the a file at some point is what white's idea is. And this bishop doesn't really have a future on e7, you can really see, but so black just chose g6 fianchetto, and one of the ideas in this position is moving the knight here and trying to push e5, freeing up his game. So now Aronian played a little bit of a weird move, but it looks pretty reasonable to me. Moving bishop d2, kind of preparing b4 at some point to kind of control this square, and with bishop d2 you can also move this knight and think about again controlling these squares, but kind of you might have like bishop a5 in the future if this queen somehow moves away or something. Um, kind of plugging in that hole over there. Bishop d2 is kind of a useful move. Um, in this kind of position, and both sides just continue developing in a pretty reasonable way. Now white plays b4 to kind of cement this pawn structure, and black decided to go for active counterplay with a5, which I don't think is really a great move, but I think black should really continue with bishop f5, and let's say after knight h4, or something, let's say um, maybe, oof, my bad. I think that the glitch, guys. b4, a5. Let's see. After bishop f5, maybe maybe you can white can consider a4, trying to break down the pawn structure, and black would probably play knight bd7, connecting the queen with the rook here, and yeah, in this position, probably knight h4, trying to take this bishop with this knight, and the position is pretty. It's not really that clear what either side's really doing after bishop e6 and bishop d3. I mean, black remains really, really super compact here, and I'm not really sure what white's plan is. Maybe f4 at some point, but again, this is really, really solid for black. I think that's a better option than a5, which was played trying to break open the game. And normally this move is, if this move was met by a3, I think this kind of structure would be really fine for black, I think. Possibly knight e4, trying to prepare this e5 pawn break in the center, but the real problem is that this can actually just be taken, and black can't take back the pawn, and decided to just castle in the game. If he takes, I think just knight takes d5, relying on this discovered attack, wins pretty much for white. So black just decided to castle here, and in this position, white just continued on the queen side here, I think, right? No, this is a sideline. My bad. Give me a second. Instead of castling, he actually played a knight e4 first, um, kind of preparing e5 at some point and taking his own fair share in the center, trying to undermine, probably just taking on d2 if given the opportunity, and then taking the a5 pawn, probably with the queen. Also, if black decided to castle, this is what I meant earlier. I think that white would continue with a4, and after b4, kind of closing the position over here, white would retreat the knight, and this pawn is probably going to have to be sacrificed for that, and push b3, queen takes b3, and then at least black has this really really nice knight here, and I think the overall position is pretty unclear after the following moves are played, where a lot of pieces gets traded, but white is definitely slightly better in this kind of position. Queen c3, queen takes a4, and I mean, even though it's a symmetrical pawn structure, I think white's probably a bit better because of the nice pawn structure and this useless bishop on g7. But that's just a sample line of each kind of ideas in the position. It's not forcing at all, but I think you guys get the point. And after, if white doesn't play a4, by the way, if he plays, let's say, a move such as bishop d3, it's kind of annoying because black can retreat the knight here, and next move after, say, the move castles, black is just getting e5 in and taking his own part in the center, and you can't really take here because black has the option of taking either, and both of those pawns are pretty weak. Let's see, where are we? So in this position, after b takes a5, we saw black play knight e4, and we saw a forcing sequence coming with knight takes e4, pawn takes knight, and Topalov played knight g5 in this position, which I don't really. Aronian played knight g5, which I don't really like really. I think that white should play knight e5, and the variations after bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and knight a6 kind of blockading the pawn and kind of supporting and attacking these kind of weak pawns. You can maybe try queen d5 in this kind of position, and I mean the position's pretty much unclear with a4 trying to break down the pawn structure here, and a position like this is very very unclear, and yeah, I'm not really sure what to say, like, other than that after e6 you pretty much get crazy complications, and the idea is to lure the bishop away once you can capture this knight and get this weird pawn structure. Anyways, that's a pretty unclear position, worth investigating. I don't think black really wanted to give up the dark sword bishop in this kind of position. I think the main line that he was going to go for was f6, relying on the fact that of this piece sacrifice on c6, and after knight takes c6, bishop b5, and black probably has to protect this with the queen right here, the really really solid piece, and queen a4 applying more pressure, bishop d7, and rook b1, and the position's pretty unclear. White castles, and he has this 4 on 1 majority and has a lot of space. I mean, I like white in this kind of position. I'm not sure what the computer evaluation is, but I like it a lot. That's probably what white should have done. Instead he played his knight to g5, and the only problem with this move is that it runs right into the game continuation with the strong move like with queen d5, and probably white should play h4, retreating the knight and having the rook defend this knight. But I mean, even this position after h6, knight h3, and black opening up the center with e5, pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn. Really, you don't want to kind of get this isolated or drop weak pawn on d4, and black castles. White centralizes the knight here, and queen takes e5. Black is doing quite all right in this position. I mean, he's ready to just come with bishop e here, or knight a6 and centralize the rooks in the center. And this pawn looks weak. These pawns, I mean, and even though white has one good piece, he's already pushed h4 for no concrete reason other than to save his knight on g5. So in retrospect, I guess h4 doesn't f4 looks like a better move on the surface, but it just tactically isn't a great idea. The problem with f4 is that after h6, this knight is almost running out of squares, and the only move is knight h3 when black decided to capture the knight and double these pawns. But the main idea behind this was to open up this diagonal, so you can see if this pawn can ever move or get out of the way, this queen can capture the rook. So black relied on this fact and took on d4 essentially temporarily sacrificing a piece here, but the idea is that e3 forks the bishop and the rook here, so white is getting his material back, black is getting material back, and after bishop takes e3, queen takes h1. I guess Aronian decided to go in this line, sacrificing in exchange, and he really did get some compensation with the two bishops and a pretty decent pawn structure to play pretty dynamically with. And after queen takes h1, it's not so clear what really how you can improve on white's play. He just played queen d1, preparing this castling move, and I think black just developed his knight here pretty reasonable. You can also think about e6, kind of blocking this d5 move forever. Maybe this was a better move, and maybe playing queen d5 at some point. I think this is probably a better try for black to play in this position. I think black has good winning chances given his extra exchange in this kind of position. Definitely worth considering and analyzing. So instead of e6, he played knight a6, and the problem with this move is that after long castles, bishop takes b5 is threatened, and queen d5 was played to get the queen out of that discovered move. White gained a tempo with bishop d2 on this, and black gave this check. King b1, and now I think that here comes black's really a big mistake of the game. In this position, he should play queen b4, and white's going to play king a1, and if black queen trades, you have this c6 pawn hanging with check, so probably in this position we would see black play king d7, and there's no way to take advantage of the king immediately without with the queen hanging, and probably in this position you really have to try to open up the center really fast and just hope for the best in this kind of position where the king lands on c8 and the rook is starting to infiltrate with the nice bishops here. Admittedly, black can get a couple pawns back and rely on this pin here, and this position should be pretty good for black in the end, even though he's going to have a tough time trying to coordinate against the bishop coming to d5 here, and the other bishop cutting across the board here. Black should be okay, and probably better in this kind of position, if not winning. I mean, maybe this is probably the best chance for black to really get something in this kind of game because of the extra exchange. But the problem with the game continuation is in the game, Topalov just chose each queen e6, and this immediately runs into d5, pushing through, breaking through, and black just takes here. I think queen takes d5, forking the rook, and the queen is already pretty annoying. Queen takes d5 is pretty much the only move, and rook takes d5 is threatening rook d2, followed by bishop c6 check, and that is pretty annoying, and also allowing the c pawn to be pushed and supported by this other bishop that might come to b6, controlling the c7 square. And I guess after knight c7, kind of blockading the pawn here, the rook has to move now. I don't know, probably rook d2, and after rook takes a5, bishop c6, this position's a bit miserable for black as he'll have to play king f8, and this is not very pleasant to play as black. And if instead of knight c7, if he plays like a move like rook c8, trying to counterattack here, I think white just retreats the rook here, and not knight takes c5 just yet because of rook c2 winning the knight here, and if that's not really possible, and if black just, let's say, plays rook c7 or castles, I think white just pushes the pawn here and can claim that with bishop b6 and rook d7 coming, and that white's better in this kind of position because he has really nice active pieces. I mean, after d5 it's already tough. After d5, instead of taking, he just played queen f5 and gave this check, and in this position white played king b2, and black decided to castle on the queen side this time, and I really don't like this move. It kind of leaves the queen side, and it's just kind of weak over here with the king having a lack of pawn shelter here, and so many pieces already kind of lining up towards the queen side, and the king shelter over here. Instead of castling this way, I think he should castle this way instead, and the position's pretty interesting. After pawn takes pawn, white grabs the material, and knight c7 is certainly an option, but also rook d8 going for this kind of position is also rather interesting when it's pretty unclear, and I think black has pretty decent chances to try and kind of defend in this kind of position, even though white has really strong pieces here. In this kind of position, especially the c pawn is potentially dangerous. And that was probably a better move, castling followed by that. Also, in this kind of position, black can definitely consider, playing knight c5 instead of knight c7 instead of rook c8, rook d8. I mean, that's probably okay for black too. But he decided to castle instead on this side, and I think this just loses the game immediately. When the problem is white just pushes in the center and um, threatens bishop takes c6, and the whole position is about to collapse. And and there's not much I can really say about this position. And the natural king b7, kind of defending the c6 pawn, is still taken by white, relying on this sacrifice. Kind of a neat tactic. Not queen d5 since the queen is defended, but this long check here, and this is actually running into a checkmate. I think king d7 should be. I think just queen d7, and black's checkmated there, and there's not really much of defense here. Yeah, it's just mate on e7, just bad. So going back, it's after d5, queen f5, king b2, castles, d6. Black just ended up taking the pawn, and white just decided to recapture and played queen f6 check and trying to hope for a perpetual check. But I think Aronian found a good move in king c1, getting out of all the checks. And after this, black's position is pretty bad, and queen f6 was played to kind of threaten this queen a1 move, but white played the strong move, check, threatening the king here, giving that check. And after king b7, bishop d4, skewering the rook here, and queen e6. Topalov just resigned after he saw his rook dropped. So overall, a pretty tough game for Topalov to lose, since he could have queen traded here at this moment, and certainly could have played better at various points. e6 to prevent this d5 move that we saw, that was really annoying, and that was probably essential to play. That would have helped his position on a lot. He missed a couple of moments here to improve on the position, but I think Aronian really had a good display of attacking to show how how to attack in this kind of position with the two nice bishops after d5 was played. All right, guys. That was a pretty interesting game. One of my favorite ones from this round. Hope you liked the video. This is Infinite Flash signing out.